Well, welcome to tonight's show. This evening we're joined by Tailed Feature. He's a Scottish YouTuber, talks a lot of sense, has a lot of fun on his channel. So Tailed Feature will be joining in just a minute. But just before he comes along, a couple of things to mention. Our conference again, do sign up for that. It's the Saturday the 14th of November. It's online, obviously, mainly in the morning and early part of the evening, but it's pinned to the top of our Facebook page. There'll be links, so do sign up for that. We've got all sorts of interesting speakers. I'll maybe talk a bit more about them next week. Just about the live stream, we've got quite a few people booked in for the next few weeks on the live stream. I'll just give you a quick rundown of some of the people we've got booked in. These are not necessarily in the right order, but these are the people we've got coming along at some point. Dr. Stuart Wayton is coming on. I would say Stuart Wayton's Scotland's answer to Jordan Peterson. It's an academic, very interesting opinions, a great critic of Scottish culture, social critic. I've got Andrew Owen, who's the leader of Destiny Church. He's coming on to talk to us particularly about some of the freedom of speech issues that church has been encountering, like Edinburgh City Council cancelling their annual conference at the Usher Hall and the legal battles that are going on to do with that. That's Andrew Owen. We've got Anthony Samaroff coming on. He's the economic spokesman for the Scottish Libertarian Party. He's written a book about universal basic income, so we're going to talk about that a little bit, and about broader issues as well. We've got another academic called David Payton coming on. Now, David Payton's just finished a big piece of research that's looked at the effectiveness of sex education in reducing teenage pregnancy. And without stealing his thunder too much, the sex education doesn't help. What does help is giving parents an opt-out from it. That's the one thing that does actually seem to reduce teenage pregnancy. Yes, that's David Payton. And we've also got David Scott, who, if any of you watch UK Column on YouTube, then David Scott's one of the presenters, the Scottish presenter for UK Column. So we'll be talking about all sorts of issues with him. So lots to look forward to. So looking forward to your comments and questions tonight. So do chip in with questions and comments as you wish. But now we'll introduce Mr. Feature. Good evening.
Good evening, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Glad to have you on the channel. I went and had a chat on your channel, didn't I? How long was that? A couple of years ago?
That was a couple of years ago now, yeah.
No. Do you want to tell people about your YouTube channel and how you got into that? What sort of things you do?
Sure. I'll just quickly go through that. So I go by the name Tailed Feature. It's a spoonerism of failed teacher because I was training to be a secondary school teacher in Scotland. And let's just say things didn't really go my way. And the longer that time went on after that, I kind of realized that I dodged a bit of a bullet because of my politics kind of changed a little bit, and I sort of realized just how the way that the education system's been going, especially in Scotland, isn't to my liking so much anymore. And I also find that the sort of the way that politics generally in Scotland is going is not to my liking, putting it diplomatically anyway. So I decided I was going to make a YouTube channel because I didn't really have anybody to talk to about these kinds of things. So it was a bit of therapy for me to discuss some of these things, and things have kind of gone sort of from strength to strength. I started off 4 years ago now. I've got about 12,000 subscribers now. I've done various things with the channel. It started off mostly about politics and philosophy and things like that, but it's ended up sort of being more trying to be a bit more satirical about things. I do some songs and some satirical songs and such like as well. And yeah, that's kind of the stage that I'm at just now. I started a weekly podcast live stream type thing at the start of the lockdown, just to give me something regular to do. And yeah, that's as far as I've got with things at the moment.
Yeah, so I've listened to some of the songs; they're very funny. So yeah, go over and have a look at the channel if you haven't watched the man in action. well worth a look. It's interesting what you're saying about teaching, that you're sort of put off by the way teaching's going. I've heard another story of someone saying that just yesterday, I think. But I think that's the stage we're at with Scottish education. That a lot of people are thinking, the people who would bring some balance to it are now thinking it's so far gone, I don't want to go into it. It's going to be such a hostile environment for me. I'll just go and work in a bank or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. At one point I did think, I could maybe just go back into this, but I started rereading some of the books that we had to read for teacher training, and it's all just social justice agenda and all that kind of thing, and I'm vehemently opposed to that now. So I don't think I could do it now.
To be a teacher, you have to sign up, you have to adhere to their professional standards. And one of the professional standards is that you adopt this social justice philosophy, by which they mean that the traditional political understanding of that. So to be a teacher in Scotland, you have to adhere to a certain political philosophy. I mean, there should be absolute outrage about that, shouldn't there? It's the same to be a doctor, I think, as well. There should be absolute outrage. And yet, it's barely a murmur.
Well, I think the general populace don't really understand what it means, because the terms that are used in the ideology, like social justice, it sounds fluffy, it sounds nice, it sounds reasonable just by the colloquial definition of it. But when you actually start looking into what's behind it all and what they actually mean, things start to look a little bit more insidious. People should be up in arms about this. But again, people tend to just focus on, are we going to get, are our children going to be better educated or not? Although I think we've seen the cases. No, they're not. So that's more what gets the focus. Yeah.
But we were talking about this a while ago, Tail Feature and I. And he was saying he thought he dodged a bullet by not going into teaching. I said if he had gone into teaching, it wouldn't be Tailed Feature. He'd be, where are we? Tact Feature.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
it'd probably be in the queue with me at the GTCS with a hearing coming up anytime soon.
Is that still going? Is it?
Yeah, I mean they've only had 2.5 years at it so far, so we don't want to rush it, do we? But it should come to a head soon. So get your ticket and come along. Anyway, so the first thing we thought we'd talk about was a freedom of speech issue. Now, I don't know if you've seen this one in the newspaper. Man arrested after allegedly calling Nicola Sturgeon a Nazi in an email over COVID funeral rules. So we've got a bloke here who wasn't allowed to go to, I think it was his uncle's funeral, and he was very annoyed about it. And he sent an email to Nicola Sturgeon that the newspaper describes as containing abusive threats. And I can't say anything threatening about it. It has a little picture of her, a mock-up picture of her in a Nazi uniform, compared her to Margaret Thatcher. My uncle died and I can't go to the funeral. Then, swearing in it, effing crap. Nicola Sturgeon's a Nazi German lover, Sieg Heil. You're an effing something, Nicola Sturgeon, SNP. You get the idea. So this was opened by a sort of SNP staffer somewhere. So they contacted the police, and the police spokesman said a 44-year-old man has been charged in connection with telecommunications offences following a report the threats were received by a member of the Scottish Parliament. The man will appear at Kilmarnock Sheriff Court at a later date. The Scottish government declined to comment. The first thing I thought when I read that, I would have thought Nicola Sturgeon would get about 100 emails like that a day.
Well, there is an element of that, yeah. I'm surprised that this one seems to have come as a shock. Maybe people like the SNP more than we like to think, if they're not receiving things like that all the time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how often? The thing is, probably with your channel, you probably don't get too many hostile people on it, do you? Would that be right, or do you sometimes?
I do sometimes. Usually, they're either clearly unhinged and going big rants about the Jews and things like that, or they just, if it's about like a hate crime, the hate crime bill or something like that, they say, oh, you're only against it because you're a racist. You know, that's about the extent of the hate that I get sometimes. But yeah, not very often, to be fair.
I'll say we maybe get more, partly because sometimes we'll spend a bit of money advertising. So it'll push our content to people who are not particularly interested in it, possibly. Some people are, obviously, and some people are, but some people are hostile. So you get the full force of their response to that. So this sort of really aggressive, offensive, the sort of thing that Nicola Sturgeon got there. I mean, we would get things like that. I mean, you know, not quite every day. You know, every week there'd be quite a few things like that would come along. I mean, just for an example, so I made a video about modern studies, the school subject, saying it's basically indoctrination. So I spent a bit of money on that on YouTube, it just presents it up the side of the screen. So if people want to watch it, they can choose to watch it. So some people watch it and they're very vehemently disagreeing. But there are two people today who basically came on and said I was a paedophile. I mean, that's just like that knee-jerk reaction. I mean, totally off the wall, completely ridiculous. I mean, I wouldn't get any damages out of them because I couldn't claim that it had any consequence. Yeah, but really appalling. I mean, much worse than what's happened to Nicola Sturgeon, I would suggest. And yet they seem to be reacting as though this is like, you know, unique. This is like a once in a decade thing that's happened. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing, like I said as well, there are quite a few people around who aren't quite firing on all cylinders in one way or another, and sometimes this is the way it comes out of them.
Yeah, I mean, if that person's bereaved, and they this is the direction that their anger or their frustration has gone in, then you can, on one hand, you can understand it. You know, if they then emailed, you know, a couple of weeks later or something and said, "Oh, like I'm really sorry," you know, that was very uncharacteristic of me. You sort of go, well, all right, fine, no harm done, really. But the cynic in me does seem to think that this kind of thing is being blown out of proportion by the SNP because they're trying to get support for the hate crime bill. Partly the amount of things that Hamza Yusuf has been posting on Twitter, admittedly not the last couple of weeks, but whenever the hate crime bill is getting discussed, he usually says, "Look at all these racist comments that I'm getting."
Yeah,
it's just posturing a lot of the time. And even if it were true, I would still be against the legislation, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think if I'd been Nicola Sturgeon, that's quite a leap of the imagination. But if I had been, I think I would have been inclined to reply to this fella. So look, I'm really sorry for your loss. I understand how difficult that must be. But, you know, we've had to make these decisions. So we really hope you'll understand. Whatever. Just something like that, I think, would have been appropriate.
Or just ignore it entirely.
Yeah. But instead of sympathy for him, they're trying to play it to get sympathy for themselves. And that seems a common thing in the internet age. You mentioned Hamza Yusuf does it all the time. This idea that, look how horrible people are to me, therefore I must be the goody.
Yes.
They don't quite say it like that, but that's sort of what you're supposed to pick up from it, isn't it?
Yeah. And you always get the same thing with feminists as well. They're always saying, look at all these misogynistic comments that I'm getting. And a lot of the time, they don't even mention the person's gender or race or anything. You're actually just disagreeing with them. Okay, they might be saying some nasty things to them, but a lot of the time it's not because they're a woman or because they're brown skinned or anything like that. It's just because they disagree. And yes, okay, they might be being abusive with it, but every study that I've ever seen has shown that actually white men get the worst abuse out of everyone. I mean, you just need to look at Donald Trump's tweets. Everything underneath it is just a barrage of abuse, and it's far worse. And there's probably a good portion of those people genuinely mean what they say, especially when it comes to threats and things like that. Whereas most people that get threats on the internet, 99.9999% of them are just some person that's just trying to wind you up, and they're not to be taken seriously whatsoever.
Yeah. Something just came to mind. It's quite interesting. Do you remember a few weeks ago, some people put a very poorly made banner outside Butte House for Nicola Sturgeon's, and that said something like Nicola Sturgeon's a Nazi or something. And it seemed to get reported in all the papers. Do you remember? Do you see that? A big red banner.
I think someone told me about it, but I never saw it myself.
Yeah. But it was really poorly made. It was a bit incoherent. It was, anyway, so someone stuck it there, but reported everywhere. Now, as the family party, we've basically learned we can do what we like in terms of publicity stunts or press releases or whatever, or demonstrations with 100 people. It will just be ignored by the media. Yet if someone does that where it goes too far, then suddenly it will get reported. So that almost motivates people to be a bit more outrageous, doesn't it? To think that's the way that you can communicate. That's the way you get some attention.
Oh, do you think that? It's one of these sort of catch-22s. If you promote something, it's the Streisand effect, I believe it's called on the internet.
Yeah.
When you try and you do all you can to sort of downplay something, but that's when it blows up and becomes more of a commonality. But
yeah, in a sense, it's the Dankula effect as well, isn't it? I mean, Dankula is a massive figure on YouTube because he's very talented, he's funny, etc. But the attention of the law to him really gave him the boost and gave him the step up to his current prominence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he had 8 subscribers when he posted the video.
Yeah.
And, and he's at 700,000 or something now.
So what that creates, that makes a lot of people thinking, oh, I wish I could give my YouTube career a big boost like that. What shall I try? Or it looks like what you have to do is really, overstep the mark in some direction or other. See if you can land yourself in hot water. And that gives you the boost. It's totally counterproductive for the authorities, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been a couple of videos I've done. I think I'm waiting on the knock at the door. I really, I really am.
Yeah, but I've got my ongoing issues with the police. I'll save those for another day. But there's stories to tell there that they're not quite ripe for the telling. But
I can imagine. I can imagine.
We're getting there soon. Just on freedom of speech, let's see if we can take it a bit further. So this email, we both agree, reporting that to police is just completely ridiculous. If someone went up, let's say this bloke had gone up to some random woman in the street and said sort of similar things to her, what should happen there, do you think?
If he said the same
just similarly insulting. You're really ugly, you've got a big nose and I hate you, and you're a Nazi or whatever.
I mean, I don't think there should be any legal consequences for doing that unless, there's any the person on the receiving end genuinely thought they were in danger of being harmed. But if it's just someone shouting, you're ugly and you're a Nazi and this, that, and the next thing, socially that person should be chastised, and people, if there's anybody else round about, they're well within the rights to tell the guy to sling his hook and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think, unless it was something constant, if it was just a random event that happened once, you sort of go, right, okay, that's a bit strange, but no legal consequences to that.
Okay, that you touched on what I was going to say next. If he kept doing it, if it became like a daily occurrence, every time this woman walked out, he'd tell her she'd got big ears or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's one of those grey areas. Is when does it become harassment? That's the tricky bit. But again, it should be sort of done socially. There should be social consequences first, I would say. If it got to the point where it was incessant, then But again, if it's just a guy walking along the street and it's on the other side of the road or something like that, and he just goes big ears or whatever, I don't think there should be legal consequences with that either.
No, like I say, if it's over into harassment or breach of the peace, I mean, if you're causing like fear and alarm to someone, you're going up to them in their face and they've got good reason to think, oh, this is quite a worrying situation, then obviously that's not on. But if the bloke's sticking letters through the letterbox of this woman every day with some insulting messages, what do you think then? I'm playing devil's advocate a bit.
I know.
What should happen then, do you think?
Yeah, see, nothing's black and white. I know that's the thing. But yeah, I think once you start, yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I know it's a hypothetical, but I can't imagine that somebody would be posting the same thing through the door, because, to be honest, they're probably looking for they're looking for an excuse, or they're looking for a reaction. Mm-hmm. So it would have to get that reaction. If you just kept ignoring it, they would just have to up the ante, and so the next thing probably would be a threat or something like that. And at that point, mm-hmm. If you go, well, this person's been this steadfast and they've done it every day, then by that point you're sort of thinking, well, actually there's probably something not quite right about them. Perhaps there is an element there that they might assault me, or who knows, or break into the house, or that kind of thing. And I do believe that policing should be preventative. So yeah, it's a fine line. It's a fine line. I don't have a definitive answer for that.
Uh-huh. The thing with like social media, even with emails, though, you can take things into your own hands a bit more easily, can't you? You can block people.
Yeah,
you can stop someone's emails getting through. So there's a sense in which surely the first thing. Remember the police? Was it Glasgow police's terrible thing when they said, you need to be kind and whatever on the internet, otherwise they'll be on your case. Yeah. Surely the first thing they should be saying is, block people.
Yeah.
Close
Twitter. Get off Twitter. That's my advice.
At the moment, a lot of people go out of the way to find what offends them.
Yeah.
It's not that they were targeted. They deliberately look for it.
Yeah.
And then complain.
If someone puts their weakness out there, obviously people are going to exploit that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that people work. Some people work. So if people say, "Oh, I'm being bullied because I'm, this, that, and the next thing," the chances are people are going to exploit that for rightly or wrongly. Because I don't think that they should be doing that. But at the same time, you go, well, okay, these people are now being horrible to me. Block. There, problem solved.
Yeah. Let's talk about another difficult case. Let's see if we agree on this one. A YouTuber in Glasgow put on Twitter. This is a few years ago, just after the Islamic terrorist truck attacks was it in Nice? A lot of people killed, and it was coming up to the Gay Pride event in Glasgow, and he tweeted. So he tweeted saying, "Where's a Muslim with a truck when you need one?" And he ended up with the police at his door. Now, what do you think of that one? You go first.
Well, for one thing, I think it's hilarious. I do have a very dark sense of humor, so I thought that was absolutely genius. His response to it was fantastic as well. It was absolutely shocking the way that he was treated. The fact that when they did come to his door, they said that he was he wasn't under arrest. They were just wanting to speak to him and all this kind of stuff. But they said, "We'll need to speak to you down at the station." And him being quite naive, he just went, "All right, okay then." And then when they got to the station, they arrested him. And he said, "Well, I've got I think he had an 8-year-old son or something who was meant to be staying with him that weekend." And he ended up being in a cell over the weekend, and so he had no means of getting in touch with his with his son. So they were really worried about him, because obviously they knocked on his door and he wasn't in, and he was meant to be taking his lad. So I thought that was absolutely shocking. But what he'd said to the police was basically, you can't prove that it was me that posted that tweet, for one thing. And the other thing was, he said, I never, they were saying, "Oh, you're wanting gay people to be run over. And he says, I never said that. It was essentially the police made the connection between Muslim with a truck and terrorist. In their heads, they'd made that connection without him explicitly saying it. So yeah, that I thought his handling of that was really good. Because I mean, obviously it never actually went anywhere, but that was ridiculous that even got to that stage. That the police even came to his door, to be honest, if you ask me.
Yeah, I've got a slightly different take. I thought it was a bit borderline. I think obviously he was joking and there was no intent to do anything. But I thought it was just getting sort of to the border of the territory where it could appear to be some sort of incitement, because it was as if he's saying, I hope that somebody. So if you're saying that you hope that somebody does it, I mean, that's getting towards being an incitement to someone to do it. Now, I would say it's not. It's just at the point where it's becoming a bit of a grey area. So I felt he was pushing his luck.
Well, yeah,
I think there've been a lot of others would have been a lot more clear cut.
I think he probably did that on purpose, to be fair. But even if someone says, I hope someone does it, I don't think that they are then responsible for if someone actually does it, because the person that does it has agency and they're the ones that have committed a crime. Even if they read someone online saying, I hope someone does it, doesn't mean that they're responsible.
But you think incitement should be a crime, though? So if someone says, please, somebody go and shoot whatever public figure, please go and do it.
I think it depends. If it's someone who has authority over a group of people and they say, go forth and kill whoever, then yes, that's the chances of a crime being committed, whether it be murder or harassment or assault or whatever, then yes, they have a responsibility. But if it's just a random person on the internet, or even just one person on the street, no, I don't necessarily think that, even if someone was on the street saying, kill all, I don't know, SNP supporters or something like that, they could get arrested for breach of the peace because they're causing a disturbance in the street or something like that. But I don't think they should be arrested for incitement, because they're probably just a bit of a loon, to be honest. But you know what I mean? It just depends on who's doing the inciting. I think if they've got power over people and that you can demonstrate that the people that they were speaking to is likely to go ahead and actually act on those words, then yes, then I think that should be a crime.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's a pretty high proportion of the Scottish population who would say things like, oh, they should all be shot, when they talk about the batch of politicians that they don't agree with. That sort of talk is not unusual at all, is it?
No,
online.
I'd like to think that's mostly hyperbolic, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but I wish people wouldn't do it. I think it's extremely unhelpful, to say the least. But because, I mean, it does get to the unhinged person, right? To come back to that. I mean, there are people who are already, beyond reason and are heading towards, really extreme mindset, and that can just push them along. That's not to say, the law needs to be stepping in every time. Like you were saying earlier on, and if you've got a healthy society, then there'll be a culture of respectful debate. And then that it's like a lot of these things, they need to be organic. As soon as the state's trying to step in to solve the problems, then in a sense it's too late. The state's not really good at it. Far better is you can just have a culture that makes it unnecessary.
Well, and I think social media just exacerbates the problem, because it's so easy to just type a comment without thinking it through. I always think, when I'm typing comments, especially on Twitter, I always think, is this something that I would say to somebody in real life? Unless I'm deliberately trying to provoke a reaction from someone, which I want to do on occasion. But most of the time, I think, would I say this in real life to anybody? And if it's a yes, then I'll post it. If it's not, then I'll either reword it or I'll not even post it at all. It's also very easy to just, follow people of this a similar persuasion to yourself, and just you end up sort of getting blinkered into one mindset. And so as soon as you see anything that comes in and challenges that, you just lash out rather than actually thinking, oh, wait a minute, they might actually have a point here. No one really does that on social media. You're more likely to do that in real life, but not on social media. So I do think that's largely, or at least a large part, to blame for the situation we find ourselves in with society.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting. I find out and about, you just come across nice people, don't you? People are helpful and polite and whatever. You drop something, they help you to pick it up. So it seems like you live in a world of these lovely people. But then you go online, it's like you're plugging into a different planet, and you wonder, probably they are the same people in a lot of cases. Something occurred to me the other day. I'm sure I'm behind the curve here. I'm sure everyone else has realized this ages ago. But generally, Facebook is a little bit more civilized, isn't it? Whereas Twitter is probably the worst. I mean, YouTube as well. I think people tend to be quite unrestrained often in comments. And it sort of dawned on me why that is. Because I think with Facebook, it's more associated with people you know. You're more linked in with people you know, aren't you? Whereas with Twitter and YouTube, it's more you're interacting with someone that you don't know, more independently. Yeah,
I never really thought of that too much, because I haven't really used Facebook for the past 7 years or so. But yeah, I have a very good friend of mine who uses Facebook a lot, and he especially likes arguing with people on Facebook. But I suppose he kind of treats Facebook like it is Twitter. Not that he uses Twitter, but he will just add anybody and will just argue with anybody, and he'll just put up provocative things on purpose, even though his family and his close friends and all that are aware of this, but they just sort of go, oh, well, that's what he's like. He's just a bit of a provocateur, he just likes getting people's ganders up and stuff. But yeah, I would agree. Twitter is absolutely the worst, and I think because you've only got 240 characters in which to try and elucidate a point. It's very, very difficult, and so it's not the place for an in-depth civil discussion, really, to be fair.
No. Something we always have to remember is what percentage of the Scottish population engage in politics at all on social media. Probably quite a small proportion. Most people will probably, a quick glance at the BBC News website, catch a few minutes of the news here and there, and that's more or less it. That's probably the majority of the population. So even though numbers can seem quite high on social media, in terms of proportion of the population, I think online it's a lot of the same people engaging with lots of political stuff. But there's a lot untouched by it, I think.
Well, yeah, and with places like YouTube, it's very easy to think that politics is a big thing on YouTube. But other than the mainstream media channels, channels like mine, even channels like Tim Pool and Sargon of Akkad and people like that, the views that they get are quite low compared to what the sorts of channels people mostly use YouTube for, and they're cat videos, makeup channels, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very easy to sort of think, oh, the political sphere in YouTube's actually quite big. It's really not. It's absolutely tiny in comparison to the main material that's been made on YouTube, and also YouTube tries to discourage political content, I would say.
And sometimes as an experiment, just log out of YouTube and then just go to its front page and see what it recommends. Dear, oh dear. There's nothing within a million miles of anything I'd be remotely interested in watching.
Much,
but that's their best guess at what a person in Britain is going to want to watch. It's quite sobering. I say it gives you a
Yes.
bit of perspective.
Tunix in the chat has just said, let's face it, politics isn't even popular on the mainstream media. It's become a weird form of entertainment. Yep, I would agree with that. When I've just been up north, I was staying in a bed and breakfast, and so I actually had the telly on. I don't even have a telly in my house anymore, but I had the telly on in the morning, and it was Sky News or something like that. And I just thought, is this the best sort of journalism that we've got at the moment? It was just horrendous. It was so. It was honestly. I just thought, this is for simpletons. It's not really telling what's happening. It's not going in depth. Everyone's got a minute to just divulge any sort of information that they have. So you don't get into any sort of conversation or anything like that. It was really quite depressing. Another thing is even on YouTube, the mainstream media channels, the likes of CNN and the BBC, even their videos don't get all that many views either. And I think that's partly because the people that use YouTube don't want to watch the mainstream media. They go on YouTube to get away from that.
Yeah, which YouTube's trying to counter, isn't it?
Yes.
YouTube's been pushing mainstream media for a while. Now, I occasionally put my radio to Radio Scotland or Radio 4 when I'm in the car. I don't watch telly. But it's just so frustrating. Within half an hour, I'm just furious because whatever topic they're dealing with, so there might be some topic. I think, I don't know anything about that, but whatever, this is going to be interesting. Let's hear a bit about it. What angle it's going to be. It's going to be about women in this topic, race in this topic, LGBT in this topic. So even if it's about, sheep farming in the Outer Hebrides or something, these are going to be the issues that come up. And it's just one thing after another. And it's so wearing. You think, can't they see it, that they're just coming out with the same angle on every single story? But obviously not.
Yeah,
I think once you're out of it, you can see it. Maybe when you're swimming in it, you're not so aware of it.
Yeah, I suppose so. There's times when I go through things and I think, is it just because I'm immersed in this kind of climate, if you like, around social justice and stuff, that's kind of what I'm interested in. So am I seeing it where it's not there because I'm very aware of it, or is it actually everywhere and no one else is seeing it? So when I start pointing it out to people, they start to get annoyed because they say, well, for one thing, can you shut up about it? Another thing is, now you're making me realize that that it is actually everywhere. It's coronavirus. Even if it turned out, 75% of the people that were killed were men, it would go, 25% of the people killed by coronavirus are women.
The women are having to do more mourning.
Yeah.
I did actually see that point made, actually.
Oh, nice. It's the classic. I think it was something like 1 in 3 homeless people are women. It was something like it was 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 or something like that. It's like, okay, you're discounting the majority of homeless people then. Yeah.
So there's no interest in the absolute performance in these areas, like the level of homelessness. With healthcare, it really bugs me. Whatever issue they're talking about, it's never how can we improve the health of the nation, or in schools, it's never how can we just raise standards in general. It's always how can we eliminate inequalities. The real problem is that the statistics are not quite coming out the same for every single way we can slice the population up. And that's the real problem we've got to solve. And so eventually with that, you start thinking, well, the groups that are doing better, you actually wish they wouldn't do so well. If they could just, come down a little bit. Well, I don't think that's what's happening in schools. I don't know what's happening in the health service, but certainly if that's what you set as your goals.
Well, it's easier to make things, lower things to the lowest common denominator than it is to bring other people up. It's a lot easier to lower standards. So absolutely. It is funny though, when there was an article last week that came out saying this woman has started it was something like a Black women's rambling group because the outdoors are for white people. And you think, is this a parody? Do people not see how ridiculous that sounds? Like, oh, black people are being excluded from going outside into the woods. And you just think, what world do you live in? No one's stopping you. That it's in. If a black person is thinking, I don't feel comfortable going out to the woods or out for a walk up a hill or something because everybody that I see is white, that's on them. That's not on everyone else. Okay, maybe it takes someone to say, actually, it's okay for black people to go outside and go hiking and stuff like that. That's if that's what it takes, then okay. But at the same time, it's never presented that way. It's always presented, well, why don't the white people be more inclusive? It's their problem. Why don't they fix it? And to me, that just seems completely counterproductive to anything to do with race relations, because you're essentially saying, well, the black people, they can't do it themselves. They need the white people to do it for them. That's how's that emancipating for them?
So what's behind it all, do you think? Do you see it as a sort of cultural Marxist angle? They're trying to divide society into oppressed and oppressor groups, and if they can make society seem bad enough, it will make people more open to, not quite revolution, but drastic change, the drastic changes in society that they want to introduce. Do you think that's what's behind it, or do you think it's a more straightforward account that just people have got into the mindset they think that this is what human goodness amounts to? Just equality is the ultimate virtue.
I think there's an element of both there. I think there are people who want this revolution, and they think that the only way of making everybody equal is to dismantle, well, the family structure, which they've kind of managed already to a certain degree, and just generally being anti-capitalist, being anti-Western civilization. And I realize that for people that aren't sort of heeding lugs into this, if you pardon my expression there, people who aren't really into this and haven't read the theory behind it, I realize that can sound like a mad conspiracy theory, that they're in it to destroy Western civilization and all that kind of thing. But that is kind of, there is no there's no end goal to any of this, really. It's just, we'll just dismantle, because it's a lot easier. Like I was saying, it's easier to dismantle things than it is to build things. And so that's what we see, is that, no, we'll knock everybody down instead of building people up. And the I don't know if it's by design or if it's just sort of a coincidence, but then there are plenty of people out there, and when people talk about anti-racism, I now have to ask them what they mean by that. And you'd think it would be fairly self-explanatory. Anti-racism means that you're not racist, but that's not what they mean. They mean you have to be actively opposed to what they call whiteness, which is again code. They always sort of speak in riddles. If whiteness is code for sort of meritocratic, capitalistic society that and liberal values, which Western civilization was built upon. So you have to be, if you're anti-racist, you have to be against all those things. Well, I'm not against those things, therefore I must be a racist. That's how it works. It's the Mott and Bailey approach to things. It's the retreat to the more simplistic, colloquial definition of things when it suits them, when it's expedient for them to do so. So it gets really frustrating, obviously, because when you say to somebody, I'm not anti-racist, if you say that to a normal person on the street, they will just assume, therefore, you're racist. When you're saying, well, no, what I mean is I'm not actually against the existence of Western civilization. And then they think you're a nutter, because it's a very deep thing to try and talk about. So whether or not that was done by design. I don't know, but it's definitely to the benefit of the people that are pushing this, the activists that are going through with this, that the general populace just think, oh, well, anti-racism, that's good. I'm not a racist, so it must be good. Social justice, that sounds lovely. That's what I'm all in favor of that as well. Oh, feminism, it just means equality between the sexes. Yep, I'm all good with that. When actually, when you give them the definitions that are being used by the activists, then things start to unravel a little bit. And the sooner we wake up to that, the quicker we can start opposing this ideology.
Yeah, and they're so in division. The whole mindset is based on the idea as it's a battle. There's an oppressed group, there's an oppressor group.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sexes, races, whatever, it's not that here we all are, let's get on together, and this is going to be great. It's right, this battle needs to be resolved, and the goodies need to win it, so therefore the baddies need to lose it. And yet alongside this, they managed to present themselves as the ones on the side of love and harmony and peace and equality, which is just quite a PR stunt, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, and you hit upon some in there. It's the way that I simplify it for people is, when they say, oh, do you support Black Lives Matter? And I say, no. They say, well, do you think that Black lives don't matter then? And I say, no. What do you think the driving force or the driving ideology is behind Black Lives Matter? It's because they co-opt these cuddly terms, Black Lives Matter. Well, surely no one can oppose that. Surely no one can oppose Antifa. It just means that you're anti-fascist, right? It's like calling yourself the good guys and saying, well, if you oppose us, you're not a good guy, and therefore you must be a bad guy, rather than going, well, actually, the things you're doing under the good guy label aren't good. So your name's a bit of a misnomer there. Sorry, you said you asked something else there as well, which I
can't remember what else I asked. I'll ask you this. I didn't ask this before. I'll ask you this.
Okay.
I think, roughly speaking, in the Scottish Parliament, I think the Greens get it. I think they realise that their mission is to pull down Western capitalist civilization and replace it with, well, who knows what, but replace it with something different. And they know exactly what they're doing.
Gulags.
I think the rest of them don't understand. They're in the category that, it seems nice. It seems like treating everyone equally. That sounds lovely. And they're just swept on that. Even up to Nicola Sturgeon. I think that's what she's thinking. I think she doesn't see it the way that the Greens do. I think the Greens are the ones with the brains in the Scottish Parliament, and they basically run the country. So they understand that they're trying to pull down Western capitalist civilization. And the others, they're like the sheepdogs, and the others are the sheep. They just herd it along. What do you think of that theory?
That's an interesting take. Yeah, I would agree with the Greens, knowing exactly what they're doing. Yeah, for sure. What is it they say about Green parties? They're like watermelons. Once you get through the green exterior, they're red underneath. Absolutely, yeah. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're unashamedly social justice warriors of the worst kind. In terms of the SNP, I think the likes of Humza Yousaf know what they're doing. I think they understand the theory behind it and are using it as a vehicle for more insidious means, shall we say. I mean, again, maybe a little bit conspiratorial, but I think a lot of it comes from, there's a guy that I speak to sometimes, and he says, basically, whatever the left do, they're projecting. Okay, so if they say everybody's racist, what they actually mean is, I'm racist. Basically, the more that they doth protest too much, essentially. So when Hamza Yusuf comes out and goes on about all this racism and stuff in society, I think it's probably him who's got the problem with race. Whether it be a jealousy thing or I don't know. I wouldn't want to sort of attribute reasons to it, but I do think he either understands it and is using it as a vehicle, or he just knows that there are useful idiots out there that believe this and will take him at his word for it. I like to think that at least some of the SNP know what they're doing. Whether or not that's better or worse than them having no idea, I don't know that.
So I think with the SNP, if you imagine you're in the SNP, you want independence. So if you hear the Greens basically attacking the history of Western culture. So if you're attacking your history, you want to start something new. How does that fit with Scottish nationalists? Well, it actually fits quite well. Their narrative is, UK, I mean, that's got a terrible history. It's all wrong. We need to start afresh with something new. So it dovetails quite nicely for them. So I think a lot of people in the SNP, they go along with the Greens sort of line, the quite extreme anti-capitalist, anti-Western civilization sort of line, because they're seeing it more in the light of anti-UK rather than more as a political philosophy. That's why I'm sure there's a great variety of takes within the SNP.
I don't even consider the SNP to be nationalistic, because they're not pro-Scottish, they're anti-English. So if they were pro-Scottish, then they would be, talking about how sort of great Scottish history is, but at the same time, they're actually saying, no, we're bad and we need to, birch ourselves for this, the sins of the fathers and all that kind of stuff, because, it's a white, capitalistic, patriarchal, blah, 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 blah. The only time that they actually talk about Scotland in a good light is when they say we're less racist than England. That's the only positive thing they can say about it. And I don't even believe that's true, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know how you really measure it. And we know that when they talk about racism, they're not really talking about the colloquial definition of it anyway. But yeah, I don't consider them nationalists in any sense. I mean, not, and I suppose one of the main thing is because they want to leave. They want to leave one union just to join another one. For one thing, it's like let's just hand who's holding the leash, just from Westminster to Brussels. I just and also the fact that Nicola Sturgeon said that she would change the name of the party if she could.
Yeah, I think with the EU, with the Scottish Family Party is neutral on that, but I think it is a fact that the direction of travel of the EU in terms of the issues that we are interested in, on almost all of them, the EU is heading in the wrong direction. There's a bit of a pushback from Eastern Europe, but generally the EU is pushing member states in the wrong direction. Like the smacking ban was basically dictated by the United Nations and by the EU. Same-sex marriage, for example, there wasn't actually any choice for Britain to adopt that because the EU basically said that they had to. It's a similar situation with the UN. The UN is effectively being captured by social liberals. So they're imposing their agenda into countries, anti-democratically into countries as well. So from our point of view, as social conservatives and the Scottish Family Party, they're both threats to our point of view. So we've really got to work with that. It's not just a matter of persuading the population in order to gain political power and influence within Scotland. Even if you have that, there's still these external forces that are pretty powerful. But Scotland's in the process of signing up to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that will be a big step in that direction. It's handing over to control to UN agencies instead of giving it to the electorate in Scotland. Scottish politicians seem as if they're never happier than when they've been told to do by someone outside the country, as long as it's not in Westminster.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that. Giving rights to children is fine if it comes with responsibilities as well, and that is something that is never discussed with kids. As someone who has worked with children for a long time, not just in a teaching setting, they're always taught about what the rights are, but never how to wield those rights or what the responsibilities that come with those rights are. So absolutely, and you're right about the UN as well. The amount of times you see them tweeting things like "Don't use the word she" or "Don't use the word chairman," use the word chairperson and stuff like that. It's like, don't tell me what I can say and not say. That is nothing to do with the UN. Get out of my life, and it's nothing to do with the Scottish government. It's nothing to do with Westminster. They should get out of my life and let me say what I want to say.
Yeah. If you look at the policies of the Scottish Family Party, but pretty well all the main ones would be opposed by the UN. And they've got their various methods of putting pressure on countries to just try and push them in the right direction. Well, what they think is the right direction. I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, someone in Tehran. They got in touch, asked me if I'd do an interview for them. So I did an interview. And after the interview, I said, what's your take on what's going on? We ended up on the UN. And I said to him, how can it happen, despite the fact that most of the world is socially conservative? How come the UN is so socially liberal? How can that happen? And it was very interesting what he said. He said partly it's based in Western countries. So the staff who employ tend to be liberal. They're not representative of the world. But he said the biggest factor is that the liberal, socially liberal movement is united around the world, whereas the conservative elements are basically in different religious groups that they're often hostile to each other. So therefore, they don't act in any sort of coordinated way. So these social liberals, they're against the Hindus in India, they're against the Muslims in the Middle East, they're against Catholics in South America or whatever. But it's all different groups, so it's divided. And they said that's the big reason why the liberal side are able to completely capture institutions like the UN. That's quite interesting. I'm not sure
I'd never considered that before. But it is quite funny, as you say, how most of the world is socially conservative. Could you imagine the UN rolling into Tehran and saying women should be liberated?
They do? They do?
They do. And what happens to them?
I think basically it's not necessarily on the issues we would want them to roll into Tehran and campaign about, but they're basically, they're very prescriptive about sex education. So they want to preach, sexual promiscuity or whatever. They want to attack the Muslim understanding of, you get married before you have sex and you stay married type idea. So they come in trying to undermine that. So it's not so much the things that we might think we would like to change in some of these countries. They go at some of the things we would say were actually their strengths there.
Well, I kind of meant, try and say that that women and men should be equal. I don't think they would be looked upon too favorably, I suppose, is what I'm meaning.
They're not. I mean, they try and promote the same feminist message they promote in the rest of the world, and a lot of the people in these countries don't like it, and they push back against it. Sometimes their pushback is undermined because they've got a whole load of outrageous views that completely destroy their credibility. But there are people who've got a sensible set of views and try and push back against it. But they're overwhelmed. Often it gets linked to aid as well in these countries. So there's strings attached. If you don't toe the line and go with the sort of Western liberal values, then the tap's turned off in various ways for you.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that, but fair enough.
The other interesting thing he said in Tehran, he said the BBC Persian service is a nightmare. It just pipes into people's homes the sort of socially liberal message that we get in Britain. So it's not just in Britain, the BBC. BBC bias is a problem. I mean, we export it around the world at our expense, at license payers' expense.
What's the Scottish Family Party's policy on the license fee?
Our policy is that we really like the idea of having a national broadcaster, but it's too far gone. So the license fee should go, and then it should just be like you enter into the contract if you want to. But if you don't, you can watch any other type of TV.
Fair enough. Yep.
Which is quite a popular policy, I think.
It does seem to be gaining a lot of traction, that one, yeah.
The new BBC man seems to be aware of the problem and is trying to rejig things a bit. But I just think it's too far gone. I can't imagine them being able to reform unless they're like sacked 75% of their editorial staff or creative staff or whatever and just started again completely. And I don't see that happening. So
in which case you'd be as well just starting up a new BBC essentially. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, before we know it, our hour is gone. That's flown by. Well, thanks very much for coming on. That was really interesting.
Oh, thank you for having me.
To hear your thoughts. Till next time. You've got your own live stream later on, is that right?
Yes. So if you search for me on YouTube, just Tailed Feature, you'll find my channel. I have a live stream starting in about an hour's time, where we go through some of the lesser discussed stories of the week, a little bit more lighthearted look at the news across the UK. Right, great. Well, thanks very much. And thanks for watching, everyone. And see you next week. Cheery. Don't forget to sign up for the conference too. Right. Good night.